For a very long time, I trusted everyone else's reactions to my decisions more than I trusted my own. If someone was upset with a boundary I set, I wondered if I'd been too harsh. If someone disagreed with me, I felt like I had to explain myself better. If someone I loved told me I was wrong, even when I clearly knew why I'd made the decision, it hurt. And I think one of the biggest changes I've made over the last decade is that I don't need that approval the way that I used to. I still care what people think. I still hate disappointing people, but I've finally learned how to listen to myself. After years of creating boundaries and communicating them over and over and over again, I have finally found myself in a kind of comfortable space where most of my family understands those boundaries and respects them. Of course, not everyone responds that way, and they certainly didn't at the beginning. One of my family members spent years telling me that I needed to forgive my mother, that somehow I was the one standing in the way of my own healing because I didn't do that. And at the time, those conversations hurt a lot, not because I questioned my decision, but because I wanted so badly for the people that I love to understand why I had made these boundaries and also to respect those decisions. But what's interesting is that that specific story doesn't end where I thought it would. Over time, that family member grew, they matured, life happened, and their perspective honestly changed. And eventually, they started setting their own boundaries and understanding mine. Today, our conversations about family look totally different than they did 10 years ago, which leads me to an important lesson. Not everyone who disagrees with you today will disagree with you forever. The good news is that people grow, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, and sometimes because life teaches them a lesson that they couldn't understand before. And I'm not saying that you should wait around and hope for people around you to change, but it simply means that sometimes you can leave room for people to surprise you. Unfortunately, I've also had the opposite experience. One of the moments that hurt me the most actually happened during the criminal trial of my father. Someone I loved dearly at the time looked at everything that had happened, everything that they knew about me and what I'd gone through, and still said to me one day, "I don't understand how you can do this to your dad." That sentence stayed with me for a long time. I will never forget that sentence. Not because it changed my mind, it obviously didn't, but at the time it made me feel so lonely. And because that person at the time was my husband, the person that I thought should be supporting me every step of the way. I had to learn that someone else's inability to understand my decision didn't automatically make my decision wrong, no matter who it was. And it made me realize that even people who love us sometimes see the world through experiences so vastly different than ours that they simply cannot understand the choices we are making. That doesn't automatically make them bad people, but it also doesn't mean that they're the right person to seek validation and support from. Sometimes the people who are least equipped to understand your boundary are the people that you're hoping will tell you that it's okay. And they can't, and that's a painful lesson to learn. Throughout the years, I've met many wonderful people who have shared their own stories. And as I've created this channel and opened up even more and just put it all out there, it has been so lovely to see how many people have quietly found me and shared even more. People who've cut off a parent or have stepped away from unhealthy siblings or people who've had to create distance from family members that they loved. There's something incredibly healing about realizing that you're not the only person who has had to make an impossible decision, because boundaries can feel incredibly isolating until you realize that you're actually standing alongside a lot of other people who have walked this road before you. That being said, you can't rely on others to validate your decisions. External validation can't be the reason that I trust my decisions. Other people agreeing with me felt good, and it still feels good, but I still have had to learn to agree with myself. After you've finally made peace with everyone else's opinions, there's still one person you have to wrestle with, and that is yourself. Because sooner or later, almost everyone who sets a difficult boundary has the same thought. What if I fill in the blank? There's some kind of second guessing. Maybe I should have done it differently. But that being said, over time, those conversations in your head do get quieter. Over time, the second guessing becomes less frequent. And one day, almost without realizing it, you stop asking everyone else whether the boundary you set was okay, and you just start trusting yourself more. I don't think I'll ever be that person who loves setting boundaries. I very much admire the people who can just casually drop in a boundary and say, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity for that this week, or whatever other casual boundary they've just landed into the thread. And then they immediately move on with their lives. I still am very much a deliberate planner in that regard. I still rehearse difficult conversations in my head. I still overthink whether I've worded something kindly enough or not. I still worry about disappointing people. That's probably always going to be who I am, but I've made peace with that. Because healing isn't about becoming a completely different person. It's about becoming a healthier version of the person you already are. One thing that has helped me tremendously over the years has been getting treatment for my anxiety. And for me, that included therapy, a lot of learning healthier communication strategies, understanding the effects of trauma and CPTSD, and eventually starting medication. I don't say that because medication is the answer for everyone. It isn't. But I do think it's important to be honest about what has helped me along the way. One of the biggest changes I noticed after starting medication and kind of transitioning into it is that I didn't suddenly become fearless or all of my anxiety stripped away. It was much quieter and kind of subtle than that. But for the first time, I had enough emotional space to ask myself a question that I hadn't been asking myself very often. And that is, what do I want? That sounds like such a simple question, but when you spent years focusing on everyone else's emotions, everyone else's expectations or their reactions to what you're doing, you sometimes stop noticing or remembering your own. I spent too much of my life asking, how will they, someone else, feel if I do this? And I often forgot to ask myself, how will I feel if I don't? One of the unexpected gifts of boundaries is that they slowly teach you to trust yourself. Not because you're always right, none of us are, but because you start recognizing something. The voice in your head that's been telling you that you're being selfish isn't always telling you the truth. Sometimes it's just fear. Fear of disappointing someone, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of losing the friendship or the relationship. And those fears deserve compassion, but they don't always deserve the final vote. Looking back at the years of boundary setting and the phases of boundary setting in my life, I don't think that the biggest thing boundaries gave me was distance from unhealthy people. I think they gave me a lot of clarity. They helped me to see which relationships were built on mutual respect as I saw who respected my boundaries and who did not, and then which ones depended on me abandoning myself. If you've recently set a boundary and you're replaying the conversation, or if you're wondering if you were too harsh, or wondering if you're selfish, maybe you're wondering if you should call them back or change your boundary to something else. What you're feeling is incredibly normal. You're choosing to value your well-being, even when that choice comes with a little discomfort. I don't know what your boundary looks like. Maybe it's saying no to yet another commitment, or maybe it's asking someone to stop making jokes that hurt you. Maybe it's stepping away from a friendship that's become one-sided, or maybe it's creating distance from a family member. Maybe it's something entirely different. But whatever it is, give yourself permission to feel all of it. The relief, the sadness, the grief, the doubt, the hope. These feelings can all exist at the same time. I still struggle with boundaries. I still overthink them. And I definitely still admire people who can set them effortlessly. But after a decade of learning, I can tell you this: healthy boundaries get easier. They start to come a little more naturally, even if they are still hard to set. Not because people change, but because you slowly begin trusting yourself more and more each time you do it. And when you have to reinforce that same boundary over and over again, it doesn't feel quite as intense as the first time you did it. You begin to realize that peace isn't something that someone else gives you. It's something you choose to protect. And eventually, that relief after setting that boundary lasts so much longer than that guilt that originally comes or the anxiety that comes with it. The peace becomes louder than the doubt. And one day you'll realize you didn't just set a boundary, you became someone who believed they deserved one. Thank you for being here with me. I'm Janae Cherie, and I hope that my stories help you to tell yours.